So I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. So thank you, Sarah, for agreeing to be here tonight and talk with us about your work. Before we get started on the actual talk session, I'm going to read out something for the students in the audience in regards to the pathway. So we're going to be doing a raffle. So courtesy of the Arts Pathway, there will be a raffle for one card account credits. And just a reminder that with your one card, you can purchase items at the bookstore, the CCBC cafes, printing, and most of the campus vending machines. The drawings will be held after the conclusion of the artist talks, so not at the end of this specific talk, but at the end of the entire series. And then winners will be notified by email. And last but not least, just a reminder that registration is open now for winter and spring semester. So please make sure you meet with your advisor and register, and make sure that you know which pathway you're on, okay? So that aside, we're going to go ahead and talk with Sarah tonight about her work in the Amend exhibition and her work in general. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Sarah. And also, if you have any questions, because there's a Q&A as well, please make sure to type them in the chat. And then once we get to that portion, I will read them off so your questions can get answered. Okay? Thank you. All right, there you go, Sarah. So, what can you tell us about the specific pieces that were included in the exhibition?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Sense. I'm a artist. I wish I could see everybody's faces. I'm not sure who's here. So I guess I can just say a little bit about myself, and then if you could tell me about the audience and who's there. My name is, like I said, it's Sarah. I'm living currently in Sacramento, California with my family. We were just saying I have 3 boys now. They're all very young. And we've just moved back a year ago from Bristol, England. And I was in England, and before that, Ireland, then England and Thailand, South America, Central America. So I've been abroad for 10 years, and I'm now readjusting and having some reverse culture shock, I guess. I'm coming out of it, it feels like, after a year. And this is where I'm from. I'm from California. My mom is Native, and that's where the inspiration from my work comes from. She's Chitimacha and Choctaw, and those are both southeastern tribes of the United States. And it's the Chitimacha community that I have been able to be a part of. But ironically, the Choctaw community is from my maternal grandmother, and it's my grandmother that I'm close to, not my maternal grandfather. So there's all of these sort of like different relationships that I try to explore in my work. So for example, like being close to a person that is my blood to Choctaw, but not being close to the Choctaw community, and then vice versa, being connected to a community through blood, but not having that connection from that and that one descendant that is my grandfather. And then of course, my father is a European mix. They've been, his father is first generation German here in the United States. Moved when he was really young, I think around 12. And then my grandmother, there's a longer history again in the South. So I'm happy to be back in the United States. It's, as you can imagine, a very strange time to come back. So we're just sorting through, life in America with a crazy political landscape and COVID and being accidentally pregnant and everything else. So I'm a really transparent, open person. I can, ask me anything. I'm happy to talk about any of these experiences. And then I'm just curious, so that this is mainly a class that's in the audience this evening?
Yes, class Jessica, I believe, I forget which class of hers, and it was also open for anyone from the public that wanted to participate in the Q&A session.
Cool. Okay, so my weaving practice I told Nicole this earlier, and I don't know if anybody else heard me say, I feel sort of funny. This is my disclaimer. I feel like I'm talking about myself in a room and I can only see three of you. So I'm going to imagine that I'm speaking out to a crowd or a classroom. So my weaving practice began in 2004. I was at Parsons in New York for my MFA. And in that time to be in New York, I think it was a really wonderful time to be a student and to be an artist. And there was a lot of excitement with the iPod and of course, like, you know, the whole internet.com, music, media, everything was just starting to change. And I just remember thinking, what can I, like, how can I incorporate this into my work? And at the same time, I was going back to my community a lot in Louisiana, the Chitimacha tribe in Louisiana. And when I was back there for one of the visits, doing a community service project with the youth there, my brother and I saw a tanning salon. It's now one of my friend's tanning salons, but it was a tanning salon that was being run out of a trailer, and it was called Native Tan. And we just found, you know, we just kind of giggled at it and the irony of, you know, a tanning salon being on a reservation and all of these, you know, preconceived ideas that, like, if you're Native American, you're dark. And this sort of, you know, small trailer, which is very much like, you know, functions as a home as well on the reservation. There's lots of trailers, and this thing becoming a business and having the name Native Tan and, you know, all of this stuff kind of deconstructed. It sort of inspired for me to photograph it. And when I was thinking about that image and that, you know, and sort of like the irony of it and my experience there on the reservation in contrast to my experience that I was having in New York City. And then also the time that I was spending with the baskets and sort of thinking about the weaving and the baskets, and also like a lot of research that I was doing with the weaving tradition. And I sort of thought it was on my plane ride back from Louisiana to New York, I thought to weave that image. And so thinking about the colors of the Chitimacha basket, which is traditionally, you know, black, red, sometimes yellow, and then the raw color of the river cane. And so I had a basket from John Paul Darden, who's one of the living basket weavers. And I had it with me in New York. And so I just copied those patterns that were in that particular basket. And I just printed on like a printer that I got at Staples, to, you know, 3 8.5 by 11 prints of that image, and then cut them and wove them together. And that was the first weaving that I had done. And I hadn't seen other weavers, other photo weavers at that time. And so I was just kind of like figuring it out and exploring color and exploring with imagery. And then I started printing bigger, and then I was introduced to other photo weaving, and the ideas just kind of like grew and expanded from there. So I think definitely like pop culture and, you know, appropriation and sort of, you know, stereotyping and all of these things that are very like on the surface for Native American culture that I think anybody can understand and relate to was definitely at the forefront of the work. And I feel like the longer that I have been doing the practice, sort of the deeper that I go into family and different like cultural like deconstruction, international indigeneity, land. Right now I feel like I'm thinking a lot about how environmental issues. Becoming, the older I get, I feel like the more of an environmentalist I become, and just being more aware of things and seeing more and trying to be like a better, better connecting myself and my boys, my family to land, and that struggle that I think a lot of people face every day, how we become so disconnected. So I think that's a lot of what I'm thinking about with my work currently. And then the other side of that is, how did we get there? And going into, digging into colonization and those colonial constructs and settler colonial histories that basically I think have really sort of stripped away that connectedness from, human to land relationship. So I'm going to go back again a little bit to the 2004. So when I was doing the those like stereotypical images and the cowgirl and Indian stuff early on, and using guns, and of course there was like the Gulf War that was going on in different things in 2003, 2004, 2005 when I was weaving, and all of those years were when I was in New York as well. So that sort of went away. I would say in like 2010, 2011, when I went to go travel abroad. So as I'd mentioned before, I went first to Central America, and then I was in Canada and South America, and I traveled, I think it was in like 3 years, I was in 32 different countries. And mostly what I was doing was traveling into the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and Southeast Asia, going into Native communities. I wanted to meet Native artists in their communities. And what sort of was originally what I had anticipated coming from that was learning about contemporary art practices for Indigenous people around the world. And it changed, like and this I think is normal for like curatorial practices, is that if you're not the artist and you're looking at art, you're not in the driver's seat, right? That's not your job to look for a specific kind of art. You're actually looking for what people are making and then making sense of that in some way. And I felt like my 2-year-old. Hi, honey. And I felt like through that experience, I had realized that what was most common within those Indigenous communities was that the artist was making work that was connected to the land, and it was about the land, and it was about cultural, traditional experiences that were connected to their landscape. So whether if I was in a jungle or in the Andes or, wherever it was that I was in the world, the work had materials that came from that land. The practices were historical to that land, to that community that was in that land. So the work changed a little bit, and the cowgirl and Indian stuff went away. Entered Trump, sorry. And like all of the, for me, awkward political conversations and engagements, and then again, living abroad and looking at that, looking at the United States from outside of the United States, even though I'm an American, I'm Native American, and I'm an American, and having this perspective from the outside and just being like, wow, are we really this far back? Are we this far removed from things that I stopped making art about? Because it felt like this is, everybody gets this, like, okay, stereotypes, like, I don't know. I'm not really sure what kind of education I thought people had or were getting in the United States, or what my perspectives exactly were. But at that in that year that I made the Cowgirl and Indian work, which was in 2018, I did really feel like it was relevant all over again. And that's why I made it again. And I did use Cowgirl and Indian imagery that was of myself that was older. I did not want to be photographed again. So I just had 2 babies by then. So it got the point across. So I reused the images. I went to the reservation in Louisiana and did another photo, basically, I wouldn't call it a photo shoot, but I photographed the bayou and, from a fishing boat, and wanted to incorporate those landscape images, those images of that space that was about that connectedness, and then impose on top of it the stereotypes, these, the violence, the mass media like misconceptions. So there you go. That's the Cowgirl and Indian work. And that while I was traveling, I also did the Choctaw Irish relation, which I think is also in the online exhibition. So this work is really, I love this body of work. I think it's, especially because I had this experience in Ireland that I am really proud of, and it was very unique. My husband and I, he's British. I met him in England while I had an exhibition at a contemporary Native arts gallery in Bristol. So I met my husband while I was there, and because of immigration, we had to move away to another country in order to basically like work through our immigration process, my immigration process, to get back to England. And my Choctaw grandma, let's leave that light on, honey. Okay, you can sit there if you leave the light on. So my Choctaw grandma was telling me about, okay, sorry.
Okay.
My Choctaw grandma was telling me about the Choctaw Irish, story of the Choctaws gifting Ireland. The numbers change because it's a perspective. When I was doing the project, the number was $20,000 US today, and now I think it's a little bit less. But basically, the Choctaw, after the Trail of Tears, collected money from the community and sent it to Ireland. And this was in a time when the British were really colonizing and enslaving Ireland, and there was, boats emigrating, moving people off of the island to the United States. And they just weren't being looked after by anybody. Nobody was sort of like standing up for Ireland. And then this gift came. So this story is actually, it's still alive today. It's this legendary story that a lot of Irish people know about, and they feel, very like grateful still for that gift. And when we moved there, we were trying to like make this temporary life there. And I just told my husband, I'm like, even if we don't stay, all I want to do is sort of like explore this story. And we went to a lodge. So I had read one story online through some random, website, a random source, that was about the Duloc walk, or I can't remember what it was called because I renamed it with the word trail for my piece, but it was called the Duloc tragedy. And I was sort of taken by how that story reminded me of the Trail of Tears. So there were several families. It was like 600 or 800 people that walked from Lewisburg to the Delphi Lodge, which is where landlords lived, British landlords lived. I'm going to turn this back on. Where British landlords lived. And they went there to ask for food because, as most of you know, all that the Irish were able to live off of was potatoes. So everything that they did was about the potato. They had to harvest the potato, they could eat it, they had to give it away. They had, like, everything was a potato. That's why it's the potato famine, because that's kind of all that they were given by the British. Everything was taken. And the potatoes went, they turned black. They had basically, this is my baby brain. I'm not gonna, you guys can help me with the word. They had disease. They'd become diseased, basically.
Like a rot of some sort, or?
They had a disease. There's another more sophisticated word for it. The potatoes had become diseased and they turned black. So they could know the only source of food, their only source of nutrition was gone. And so, and that's why it's the Great Irish Potato Famine. So this group of hundreds, 600 to 800 people walked 10 miles to Delphi Lodge, to the landlords, to ask for money, food, anything, shelter, like they needed help. And Delphi Lodge kept their gates closed and didn't let them in. And they had to walk back. And it was a storm that night, and people died. Children died. And it was, it's this sort of like very sad, like horrible story about, just really bad mistreatment to the Irish by their neighbors, the British. So I drove to the Delphi Lodge, because the Delphi Lodge is now today a hunting and fishing lodge where people go and stay. It's very regal, it's very posh. And I went there and met with my husband, and we met the manager, and he invited us in, and I told him about my research, my work, and he invited us in, and we just started talking, had some tea in front of the fire. And at the end of this conversation, he offered my husband a job, which is what we needed in order to stay in Ireland. So my first son was born at Delphi Lodge. I was pregnant at Delphi Lodge. We had our first baby there. So I made pretty much all of my work for the Choctaw Irish relation was made at Delphi Lodge. So it was like, I was the immigrant at Delphi Lodge. I was the Choctaw that was living there. So I felt like I was just in the landscape, and it was this really remarkable experience that it's just really special to me. And I think all of the work that I created there was, it just feels really powerful to me. If I can say that about my own work. It's not, I don't have it anymore. Actually, all of it sold. I don't want to say I regret selling every last piece, but it's just the way that it happened. The last 2 pieces went to a big collection. I couldn't say no, so it's fine. I gave one to my mom, so that feels like it's still mine. But it was a really, like, it was just such a powerful body of work. And then I took all of it on the plane with me to Oklahoma when I was pregnant with Archie. And my grandma, my Choctaw grandma, I was talking with her because it was her stories that I was really incorporating into the work. And so I had met with her the last time I had been in the United States to say, okay, this is what I'm doing. And she gave me all these memoirs and like typed up stories. And then I was in Ireland, and we were supposed to talk on the phone, and we had scheduled to talk on this Monday. And my mom called me first, and she had died that morning. And it was just like everything became that much more powerful and that much more emotional. And it was just so charged. And and then a few weeks later, I was supposed to exhibit all of this in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that's, just around the corner where she was born and raised in Broken Bow. And so I didn't just go out there for an exhibition. I went out there to bury my grandma as well. And that was my first time in Oklahoma. And, you know, I wanted her there with me, and her voice. That video, I think, is also on the website for your online exhibition. It's her voice that's narrating that story. And that narration was echoing through this 2-story building. It was quite vast. And so she was there, and her voice was there narrating the space, like talking through the space. And, you know, she was an artist too. And it was just something that was supposed to be made. And I, for whatever reason, felt like I was chosen to make it. And all of this stuff came together in that way. So, I think that's the more emotionally charged body of work of the two. Whereas the Cowgirls and Indians, I think, is more, like I said, there's a lot of surface material there. I can do questions and answers now. I can keep talking, but I think that's a good, I think that like gives the overview. And then if you guys have looked at my work, then the in-between part of that is Weaving the Americas. And that's when I was traveling and meeting with the Indigenous artists. Oh, I can say my current work, I'm not sure how this like sits right now, because I don't know when I'm going to get back to London, but I'm currently a visiting fellow at the British Library. So my current research is all about British colonial histories with the United States. So we were just at the cusp of like getting an exhibition put together for the British Library based on my research. And I was supposed to get on a plane on March 8th, and then I didn't get on the plane. And it was like, we're going to meet and we're going to get an exhibition on the calendar. And so I worked really hard for a year on, I like the writing. I love the images, the maps, like I absolutely love the research that I've done there. It's an open book at the moment. Everything's stopped, everything stopped and slowed down. So it's still current. My fellowship is current. My research is current. And I don't know when that's going to close. So that's where my mind is. And I can say, and this is the last thing I'll say before questions and answers. As you guys probably all know, there's Mayflower 400. So in a way, it's nice to see 2020 come to an end and the Mayflower 400 sort of like let's let that end, put it behind us and move forward. And maybe we can, I think other more relevant things rather than how should we celebrate the Mayflower? How should, let's take the attention off of that a little bit, and let's look at the broader pictures, like the environment, climate change, connection to land, other things that I think can come from that. But let's get more focused on that, and let's focus on, here we are, Thanksgiving, like a little bit less focused on the, I just saw a question, a little bit less focused on the, the boats, the pilgrims, should we celebrate Thanksgiving? Should we not? I kind of am like, okay, let's move on. Anyway, here I am. Other people can talk now.
Well, thank you. All of that is extremely, I always love, I do always love hearing artists talk about their work, because, you can read a statement and you can kind of understand it a little bit by having that access, but really hearing you speak, particularly about the last piece with your grandmother, that personal connection with the work, it's amazing, and it's just beautiful to hear about. Okay, so I've got a couple questions here. I'll go ahead and start reading.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just talking to a lamp, so I have no fear. You guys can ask me anything.
Okay. So from Emily is this question. The description of the Irish Works installation sounds so powerful. Do you often work with audio installation alongside your work, or was that for this work in particular?
That's the first time that I did like a narration, and I can't even tell you like how important that feels to me, how relevant I should say, like just that that was the last time I saw my grandma, and this was all in preparation for this exhibition. And I'm so glad that I was just had that thought to record her talking. I love it. I just can close my eyes and listen to her talk, and it's like just right there again. Um, I did another video, but again, I just want to say again, that to me feels like it just happened because it was supposed to, because there were so many other things that were going on with that work that were beyond me. And if I was just like a vessel, or all these things were moving through me and with me and sort of like making it happen. Because I've never done any sort of narration and video before that or since. I haven't done much with my videos that I've made. I always have that on my to-do list to like submit them to things. The Weaving the Americas video is 15 minutes long, and Urban Shaman Gallery in Winnipeg, Canada, 2 winters ago, so just about 2 years ago, was so great. And they helped me. They basically got an editor for me, and I had like hours and hours of interviews. It was like 60 something interviews with artists, and I had already transcribed and translated the foreign languages, and mostly Spanish into English. And they hired an editor for me, and we got all of this material shrunk down to 15 minutes with subtitles, and it's awesome. That has audio, but it's not like that narration, their interviews. And then I did another body of work that's actually with the cowgirls and Indians work. I don't know. Did I send you only one video?
I don't remember.
I think you only asked for the one, because then there's another one called the Vanity Photo Shootout, and it's still images of me and 3 other women, and it's 2 Indian princesses and 2 cowgirls, and we do a photo shoot, so it's very like over sexualized, like glam, and we kill each other, so it's like out of vanity, but it's like, so it's playing on vanity and over sexualization of the cowgirl and the Indian princess, and being white but wanting to be native, and all that stuff. It's very silly. It's very silly but very real. And then I do an Elvis Presley Blue Moon is the audio on the back of that. And then in between the photo shoot images is video that I took on the fishing boat of the bayou. So it's just like everything is like really like slow. So you're moving through the landscape. And so in a way it's like putting in, with the still images, like putting in the like cowgirl and Indian sort of like war, but making it really playful. But it's not playful. Okay.
So our next question is, let's see, this is from Jessica. Could you talk more about the process of your weaving and how you learned that process? Also, could you talk a little about the weaving patterns and their meanings?
Sure. So I'll do weaving patterns first, and then weaving history. So the weaving pattern that I use most often is raven's eye and rabbit's foot. And this pattern, and it's this like diagonal, there's a line, and then there's the raven's eye, and then there's a line, and then there's the rabbit's foot. That's the basket, my first chitamacha basket, the only chitamacha basket that I own. That is repeated mostly in my work because I taught myself how to weave. When I started learning how to weave, specifically just to weave photographs, there were only 5 weavers. And that was part of why I wanted to learn how to weave and why I wanted to do it. There were no classes, there was no instruction, that sort of thing wasn't available. And the weavers that I talked to the most about it, sort of explained to me that it was very much like a, you have to work really hard, like it's a tough love sort of a thing. So you knock on the door and wait for somebody to answer, and then you have to go back again and again and again and again. And I didn't have that luxury because I was only there for summers. Eventually, I think after 15 years of asking, I finally got to learn how, start to learn how to go out and find the river cane and how to prepare it. And that's a process that I'm still in. So that was exciting and still is exciting. Again, I was looking forward to moving back to the United States to be closer to my community and go there more often. I try to go once a year, especially to make sure the boys go back once a year. And I was doing that even though I was in Europe. And then I moved back, and now it's, I can't go on a plane. So I think that's hard. That's one of the hardest things about this. But, this won't last forever. Weaving history. So when I started teaching myself how to weave in 2004, I wanted to be really clear and very matter of fact that I'm teaching myself how to weave. So this is the basket that I own. This is the pattern that I'm studying because this is from the basket that I have and I'm teaching myself. So it was I wanted to be very matter of fact about that. I didn't want to convey in any way that I was a master weaver and that I'm taking this tradition that was passed down to me from my mother or my father and then, changing it, because that's not what happened. It was very much like I'm an outsider, even though I'm an insider. And this is something that I've always wanted to do and a tradition that I've wanted to learn. And I had to, find other ways to be able to learn it. The Chitamacha community has been really generous and with me, and they helped me by funding a part of my Weaving the Americas project, a small part of that. There's a piece in the Chitamacha Museum and a piece in the Chitamacha and the casino there, the Cypress Bayou Casino. So those little things, and then I have murals. I painted murals in the preschool and in the main school. So that I'm really proud of that. I wish I could do more. That's another thing. I would really like to have an exhibition there, something that would be community oriented. So I think, and maybe some of the other artists have talked about this, but there's, as a contemporary Native artist, it's really important to me to, to always be connected to and working with the community. And it's always a challenge if you didn't grow up in the community. And I'm one of those people that didn't grow up in the community. So I have family there and I have friends there, but I really have to work extra hard to get myself there and to be engaged and to keep up those relationships and to always make art respectfully. And, I think that's an important word, just to be respectful.
So, if I may ask, so you didn't grow up within the community. Where did you said you grew up in California, correct?
I grew up, here where I am now in Northern California. And I went back when I was a teenager for the first time.
Okay.
And so this, it was like this really impactful experience because, and this is, I think this is common for a lot of Native people who didn't grow up in on their reservations or within their communities. If there's some sort of a rupture in the family, like for us, it was the relationship with my grandfather and my mother was gone. And so my mom's way of sort of dealing with that, or how she chose to have a healthy relationship with her kids and with her, with her new family, was to not be a part of her dad's life in any way. So even though she cared about like his siblings and that other family, the focus was more on my dad's family and her kids. If that makes sense. And I think with abuse, that's normal because you sort of cut abuse out and then you move forward, right? You're going to get rid of anything that could be harmful to your kids if that's a choice that you make, which is the right choice. And so when I went back when I was 18, there was all this family that knew me, knew who I was. Sorry.
It's okay.
But I didn't know their names. I didn't know who they were because that was my mom's choice. So it was very emotional for me when people were telling me about my grandfather. And I grew up my whole life thinking, my grandfather's really, really bad man. That's why I don't know him. That's why we're not allowed to know him or see him or be around him. So all of a sudden now that connection to all of these people is that man. And so now I'm hearing stories about him and it's like, oh, it was really uncomfortable because this was the man that really hurt my mom. So that, and then you get through all of that and all of that like emotional junk and whatever. And then there's community, and then there's friends, and there's family, and then there's different way to connect to people. And it doesn't have to be through that individual. And that was my choice and my effort. And that's it. It's a choice. I think that's the choice. Like I could say, oh yeah, I'm Native, I'm Chitimacha and Choctaw, but I live this life over here. But there was a pull for me. I became very passionate about the weaving, the history, the community, the lands, the landscape. We're still on our ancestral lands. And even, and bigger than that, just like the whole contemporary Native art movement in the United States and beyond. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Oh, no, thank you for sharing. I just sort of jumped in with that question because
That's great.
Thank you. Oh, okay, I'll get back to the other questions. Okay. All right. So this is from Catherine. Going back to the Choctaw gift, she says, are you aware that the Irish, inspired by the Choctaw gift, have donated 1.8 million to the Navajo and Hopi for COVID relief, as those tribes have been the most affected? Do you see the stories you are weaving as carrying these connections forward?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And I think that's sort of, yeah, this year is really blurry for me, but two of my colleagues at the British Library sent me an article on that, and very generously the director said, oh, I'm surprised they didn't mention your work. And it's exactly what that was said in that question. Like, I would be so flattered if they did mention my work, but it doesn't, obviously I'm not like upset that it wasn't mentioned. But I think that as an artist, as like a cultural creator, like what I mean, somebody that's making things and putting it out there for the public, you want to have some sort of impact. Otherwise, we wouldn't be making the work. And there's stories, but there's political activism. There's empathy. There's sympathy. There's wishes, right? We can wish for things. We can hope for things. We can want to change things, want to bring, past experiences to life, or maybe fantasize about changing the past in some way to go on to a different path. And I think those are all the gifts that art can give to us. And any time that I am making something that is emotionally charged, like this body of work was emotionally charged, but that, has like a story of empathy, a story of giving. It's a beautiful story. It's not my story. I just was making art about it.
I have a question that segues into, or from that one. So Zoe asks, do you have a favorite from the Choctaw Irish Relation series?
Yeah, it's the one I gave to my mom. So there's one that my mom, my grandma, that's fine. My grandma was photographed with my mom when my mom was 3 days old. And it's in that photograph I weave into one of the pieces in the body of work. Okay, let's not bang the table. And I finished that piece on my mom's birthday. So it was on February 19th, 2015. And right as I finished it, which, and I'm looking at this image and it's my grandma and she's holding my mom, and, it was already sort of ironic because it was my mom's birthday that day. And the phone rings and I answered the phone. It was my grandma. And I was at my parents' house at the time. And she was like, "Oh, hi, Sarah. I was calling for your mom to wish her a happy birthday." And I was like, "Oh, that's so funny that you're calling right now, because I just finished weaving this piece of you holding mom." And then she told me the whole story about that photograph and who took it and how long ago, that mom was 3 days old. And it, again, this was the whole, like, all the energy in that body of work. It was so beyond me. It was so beyond my control. It was just everything was coming together for this work to be made in this really magical way. So I definitely would say that's my favorite piece from that series. And I wrote, you'd have to zoom in on the piece to see it, but there were some of her stories that I like wrote backwards, like on the back of paper, or I like wove through, because she was hesitant if she wanted those stories to be exposed from her memoirs. And so, it was about like just experiences in her life that were sad or that were hard to deal with or talk about. And so she also felt like she didn't want them like to be a part of the weaving. And that's actually what we were going to talk about on that Monday when she passed. So I gave that piece to my mom. So that's the one piece that we have, and that my mom has, that I feel like is still mine, I guess, kind of. But I'm so pieces that I make where my mom definitely is like, that's mine. Like when I was doing a trade with an artist in Alaska, and I was like taking it to get shipped, and it had my sister and I in it when we were kids, and my mom was like, no, that's mine. And she literally like took it from me, and it like, and set it in the living room, and that was it. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and that's cool. Like, that's actually the right thing to do, because some things just should stay in the family, I guess.
It's a mom's prerogative.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Okay, this one here. From Catherine, why did you choose the material of bamboo and rice paper for the cowgirl Indian weavings? How would that relate to that land and that place?
So when I was in Thailand, I went to a bamboo paper maker. One of my friends from Canada, who I had met while doing residencies at the Banff Center, Jewel Shaw. She's a wonderful printmaker, an amazing person and friend. And she and I decided to go to Thailand together, and it was fantastic. And I was going there to, I wanted to meet with artists in different, parts of Thailand and other parts of Southeast Asia. And she had this whole other agenda. And I think her agenda was so much more beneficial to me in the end, because really, like, I think my interviews with Indigenous artists really did stop in the Americas. And I think that what I did with Jewel was actually much more relevant to my work. She was meeting with printers, print studios, and this paper maker. And he lived in Mr. Supan, that was his name, Mr. Supan, and it was in northern Thailand. And he lived in a bamboo forest and made bamboo paper, and it was like the most beautiful bamboo paper by any bamboo paper maker standards in all of Thailand, and everybody wanted, Mr. Supan's paper. So he was a Buddhist who was interested in quantum physics, and he was an absolute delight to talk to, and really inspiring and interesting, and just, an individual that really like lived his art. He lived in it, within it, and it was everywhere. Just totally, it was his whole aura. And so my Weaving the Americas body of work that I did while living in Thailand, all of that had his paper incorporated into it, which really made it feel more like a collaboration. He really inspired the bamboo paper. And after that experience, I had done a printmaking residency at Arizona State University. And the professor that I was working with there, and then 2 grad students that were helping me do my printing. But really, I mean, they were like print masters. They're amazing. One of them still does all of my printing. Like, nobody else does my digital printing except this one grad student. He's now a teacher himself. But I just lost my train of thought. Hold on. The professor, Mary Hood, she had gotten paper for me, rice paper and bamboo paper, because she said, what do you want to do while you're here in residency? And I said, I really am interested in transparency and bamboo paper. So she got me bamboo paper and rice paper that I could do digital printing on, rolls of paper. And then we just started experimenting with how to make that transparent. And that hasn't left my work since. So now all of the work that I do, I use this particular rice paper and bamboo paper and do a treatment to it to get that transparency. And I use that in, the Choctaw Irish relation, which is why you see that in the image label, but it's not an exhibition, so you see it in the image detail.
And let's see, I think I have one more, and it pretty much relates to what you were just talking about, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. What techniques / tools, materials do you use for the weaving?
My hands. It's really just a hand process. Once I collect all of my images and, find my images and get them photographed and into the computer and then into Photoshop and playing around in Photoshop, which is all this part of the process I love. Like, I love my kids, but I would love to have more time to do this again. But I mean, it's so time consuming. It's so time consuming, all of it. But once the image goes to my printer and is printed, and that's his art, right? Because I think there's a real art to printing. I don't let anybody do my printing now because he knows exactly what I want. And he prints it, ships it back to me, and then I cut by hand and I weave by hand and I do adhesive all by hand. And and sometimes there's hand stitching, which I'd love to do more of. I miss weaving. I love my newborn baby and all my kids, but it's a very time consuming process that I'll get back into soon.
I understand. Same thing. My work is a time consuming process, and chasing a 2-year-old around is not conducive towards detail drawing or painting.
Monsters. Monster in my house.
Well, Sarah, I do want to say thank you. I think that was my last question. Let me just double check through to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
Okay.
Let's see. I think I did get them all. Okay. So I just want to say thank you again. This was wonderful. It was lovely talking to you and hearing you talk about your work. For everyone who came, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a very lovely evening or afternoon or wherever you are at in the world. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. One of my most favorite parts of my career has been traveling to my exhibitions. And I mean, there's so few exhibitions that I've actually missed. That this has been, I mean, I really took it hard in the beginning of COVID because it was the first time I had to really cancel 3, 4, 5, 6. I had all this stuff lined up that I was supposed to do this year in 4 different countries, and I was really looking forward to it. And I'm glad, thank you for doing this so that we can still talk and converse. And I wish we could do it face to face, but this is okay, so thank you. Thanks for still putting something together for us artists, because it's important, and it's important that we keep talking about these things, because we have to keep making and we have to keep talking, and that's how we are gonna get through this fun time. Make kids dinner alarm.
Okay. Well, go make kids dinner, and thank you so much. And thank you again, everyone who came.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Bye.